Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is Jamal Arif. I'm part of the Orca Cloud Infrastructure team. So, in this video, we are going to talk about the geolocation policy and a couple of other policies as well, just to give you a quick knowledge of how do you set up other policies and do a demo of the geolocation policy. Our quick safe harbor statement. All right, so moving forward, let's go ahead and take a look at the other traffic management steering policies. So we have load balancer. If we select load balancer, there are a couple of changes that we have in the way that you set up a policy. So you define a policy TTL in the same manner. You can have more than one answer counts, and you can add additional answers against each answer, basically, and against each record that you create. You can assign a weight to it, and based upon the weight, you'll like the answers value increases. The higher the value, the more likely it is to be served using the load balancer policy. So for instance, if you want to do 90 and 10%, in that case the first answer is going to be hit just 10% of the time, and the next is going to be the hit 90% of the time. Just like the failover policy, you can also associate an health check and attach it with the policy. So right now it's giving me an option of either selecting a health check which is already created in the previous policy, or I can also go ahead and create a new one, or I can just not associate a health check, and regard like whether they are healthy or not. The only policy, the only policy that the DNS traffic management would take into effect would be the load balancing, and it would not matter that whether whether that backend is healthy or not. And then similarly, you can attach a domain as well. If we go to additional geolocation steering, and the geolocation steering example, the differences are that you create multiple pools, and then within each pool, you can associate a particular location with it. So for instance, I can associate different either continents or based upon different countries and regions, and then associate that to an individual pool priority. I can also do a global catch all. So for instance, users in Japan should go to my end point, which is in JPAC area, or users which are in European region should go to my endpoint which is in European area, and users from North America should go to the endpoint which is in North America. But all the other regions, for instance, somebody connects from Australia, I can have a add global catch-all, which means that all of my other regions which I don't have a specific priority for, I can always send them to my default back endpoint, which can be either in any of the answer pools that I have created. If I don't define a global catch-all, then it would just randomly select an answer from the available answers that you have. Similarly, like the other policies, you can also attach a health check over here. So it also gives you an option of either associating as available health check or creating a new one. And then you can attach the domain, which is also optional. The other two policies are very similar as well. So if you select the ASN steering policy, the ASN steering example gives you the differences would be that in this case, when you are defining the rules, you define an ASN number for your organization or for a particular organization or a telco that you want the traffic to be routed to. And similarly, you can also add a global catch-all. In case of IP prefix steering, when you are setting the rules, you have to define individual IP subnets. So you can add something like this, and then create a subnet which create a rule based upon the subnet address that you want to route the traffic to. Again, you can also add an additional add global catch-all over here as well. So let's go ahead and do a quick demo of a geolocation steering. So I'll just go ahead and quickly create one of the geolocation policy. I'll give it the 30-second TTL. In the answer pool, I'll create again the same web server 1. I'll create another a name and forward the traffic to my web server, this is the 2 web server, and I have another. This is my first web server. and then my server pool 2, and then attach the public IP address of my DNS demo 2. Over here in the geolocation, I'll provide the like areas from where I want to connect to. So let's say I have a North American region, and in the North America I want to connect to pool 1, and as a secondary I want to connect to pool 2. However, from Europe I want to connect to my second pool web server, and as a backup would be my web server 1. I also want to add a global catch-all, and for global catch-all I always want them to go to my web server 1, and then as a backup go to my web server 2. I can attach a health check policy. So I have a health check policy which I created in the last failover policy. I can just use the same health check over here and then add a domain name saying geo example and select the same zone that I have. Click on create policy. So I just selected the policy over here. Once it gets created, you can take a look at the policy, the geolocation policy that is created. So you have a details page which lists similar information, provides you the health check which is attached with this, and the DTL associated with the current policy. It also gives you a policy narrative. So in the policy narrative, you can see that your North American servers would, like clients, would go to the web server 1. Your Europe clients would first go to web server 2, and then for a catch-all they will always be forwarded to web server 1. In the health check, you can take a look at the health check of the 2 web servers that you have, and currently both of them are healthy. So let's navigate to the zone that we have attached. So in this case, we have attached geoexample.oci@amazon.net. So I'll just go ahead and write geoexample dash. So you can see that it navigates now to a web server 1 in my backends, because currently I'm based out of North America, and it's always forwarding my traffic based upon the geolocation staging that I'm doing to the web server 1. I also have like a basic Linux box running in Frankfurt region. So currently I have this Linux box which is in EU Frankfurt 1. So I'll just try to log in into this Linux box and try to see if. So I'm logged into the Linux box in Frankfurt, and I will use a browser inside my terminal and try to get to the endpoint, the same endpoint. So geoexample.oci-demozone.net. This time it should resolve to web server 2, because my policy states that anybody in geolocation as Europe should connect to the backend server as web server 2 as primary, and then web server 1 as secondary. All from this video. Thank you for joining.